my guest this week is somebody who is very much involved in social action and community development and all the rest of it. And yes, they are only labels, but indeed this person has so many fingers in so many pies. It's phenomenal how this person ever manages to hold down a full-time job, but that's another story, I think, in itself. Now, as soon as you hear him, you will know that from his voice and indeed his accent that he's not from these shores. However, I think this person has lived here so long and is so integrated into Dublin society that we actually could only call him one of our own. Yves Chavanne, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Caroline.
Where are you from?
God. I'm originally from France, but I am a strange Frenchman because I am half Corsican and half Breton, Brittany, with a name from the Alps, from the Savoie.
From Savoie, meaning what?
The name Chavanne, it means the wind that blows from the mountain.
So you're a bit windy, are you, in terms of blowing from the mountain?
Yeah, cold air.
Oh, cool. And did you grow up, was it in mainland France or was it in Corsica?
No, I grew up in a little village in the south of France near the Italian border called Golfe-Juan, and just across from the island of Lérins, where the man in the iron mask was kept, but also where St. Patrick went to study.
Oh.
So they have still the statue in the monastery in St. Honora.
And was that a piece of information that you knew when you were growing up, or did you only become familiar with it when
No,
you
I
came
knew
to
because
Ireland?
I used to work on the island, and I used to work on St. Margaret. I used to go every week to St. Honora to buy the liquor from the monks, because they make liqueurs called Lerina there. And there was the statue of St. Patrick there, so I knew the story.
Wow, and what age were you when you were going collecting this liquor?
I started to work, I was 14.
Wow. And was that kind of the normal age for children, in that area to start working?
Yes, because, you worked mostly in tourism, so I was working every summers. But I was lucky because I came from a family of 6 children, but I was number 3. So the 2 eldest had finished school at 14. Myself only worked in the summer. I was able to go to secondary school because there was more money coming into the house.
And what did your father work at, or did he work?
Yeah, my father worked, he was a lineman for the PNT. That's the people who put the lines for the telephone.
Sure. Okay. And was your mother in the same sort of genre as Irish women, and at that time sort of at home?
She was at home, but she would work as well in the summer, when people were renting villas, she would do the cleaning, when people leave the villa after 1 week and the cleaner needs to be cleaned completely for the next people. So she used to do that as well.
And the way the way you're talking, it sounds as though lots of tourists used to flock there. Is it a beautiful place, or describe it to me?
Yes, it is. It is you have the mountains, the Alps falling into the sea, and so it's the Mediterranean, the blue sky, blue sea, the sun. I know.
It's like, you kind of long for that, don't you?
Yes.
And still you left it all behind.
Yes, I don't know why. Some people ask me, why did I come to Ireland? I can tell you it's neither for the weather nor the tax man.
So what was it for then?
It must have been love.
Do you want to expand on that now, Yves?
Yes, I met my ex-wife. We're separated now, but at the time, met my wife in France, and I had a contract to go to work in Iraq, but she had to come back to Ireland. So I scrapped the contract and I came to Ireland 26 years ago.
26 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. And did you come straight to sort of the Dublin area, or did you...
But I had lived in Ireland before, in the 70s, early 70s, but I lived in the north at the time, in Derry and Belfast.
Turbulent times.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experiences there.
Gosh. It's mad, but faith is that I had to leave France because I refused to go into the French army because, like as I said, Corsica and Brittany are the 2 last colonies of France, and I wasn't going to serve in their army. So I was going to Morocco.
Right.
But I ended up in London.
How?
Somebody gave me a lift, and he was going to Valence.
Okay.
And I thought he meant Valencia in Spain, but it was Valence in the Rhone Valley.
Right.
So I was on the way up. I decided it must be, a direction I have to follow and end up in London.
Right.
But of course, in London, I had no work permit. It was before the EEC, and I was how you call
Like an asylum?
illegal alien.
Okay.
So I was arrested, and I escaped. And the only place I could go with those papers was Ireland. And I arrived in Northern Ireland, and I chose the right day to arrive because it was internment day in August 1971.
Wow. Just before we go on to get the August in 1971, you escaped in London from custody. What happened? How did you manage
Well,
it?
the police arrested me.
Right.
There was and they put me in a squad car.
Okay.
And they stopped at the traffic lights, but they didn't have the child lock or whatever.
Right.
So I just opened the door and legged it. But of course I couldn't go back to the flat, get my gears or anything.
So what did you do?
So I went to a squat, and then I met an Irishman who was coming back to Ireland, and so we each together to Stranraer, and then took the boat from Stranraer to Larne, and arrived in Belfast on internment day.
What was that like? Just give me a picture of what it was like to arrive on that day.
It was mad because it was burned buses everywhere, and but the people were so nice because we had an address on the Glen Road, and there was no buses because the buses had been burnt and all of that. But people went out of their way to show us the way and the safe way to get there. So that was my first contact with Ireland. It could have been traumatic, but it was the Irish welcome. Really, I remember the way people really went out of their way to make sure we were safe and to get us where we were trying to go.
What age were you?
I was 19.
I mean, I'm just trying to imagine, you leave your hometown after refusing to go join the army. You gallivant off into strange countries. You end up in a different country than you anticipated. And now you're over in Ireland where it is like bedlam above in the north.
Yeah.
Was it not strange?
I don't know, because I think when you're young, everything is an adventure.
True.
So it was maybe even exciting, wow.
Cool, man. So the Glen Road, I'm not familiar with Derry. What part of town is that?
No, it's in Belfast. It's the top of the Falls
right,
Road.
okay.
It's at the top of the Falls Road, and there was a flat, and I didn't know at the time the address we had was, but it was a safe flat where they were publishing the Unfree Citizen. That was the magazine of the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association.
Okay.
So we ended up there, and it was just past the big RUC station. And actually, the place is still there. My daughter just moved to Belfast there a few weeks ago, and I went, and the place is still there, next door to the dentist. I don't know. I don't think it's the same dentist that at the time, but it's still there.
And has it all turned very respectable now?
But it's a working class area, and it's a nationalist area of Belfast. So there is kind of, but it's maybe a little bit better off than the Falls. It's further up.
And when you were up there, how long did you actually stay sort of in that safe house?
So we were there, but after a couple of weeks, it was raided by the army, the British Army. So we just managed to jump out from the back, and then we moved to Derry, Free Derry, because behind the barricades in the Bogside, in Stanley's Walk.
Wow. You did a lot of running from police and armies, didn't you?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how long did you stay in Derry?
I was in Derry for a few months. Then I went down to Dublin. I had been arrested, and I was going to be deported back to France. But the French consul was a very nice man. And he drove me to the border because he knew that when I was arriving in France, I would have to do 2 years in prison for desertion and then do my time in the army. Okay. So I went to Dublin, and in Dublin I was sleeping rough, and but I found a place. I found a very good place to sleep in Dublin. At the time, it was in Trinity College. They had a pottery department, and at night they put the kiln on to cook the pottery. So I used to sleep in there at night and be warm.
How long did that go on for?
That went on until Bloody Sunday, and then when I heard the news of Bloody Sunday, I had 2 friends were killed. So I went up for the funeral in Derry.
Gosh, and what was that like? I can only imagine what
it was. It was mad. I even to think about it today, I still have that sadness, and I can understand that. And it wasn't even people related to me; it was people I knew. So it was hard to believe that a civilized country would do that. And even today, even with the Sackville inquiry, it still doesn't seem credible yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
What do you think it'll take to become credible in your mind?
That maybe, the government recognize that what they did wasn't right, and that maybe it is a lesson learned, that people have rights, and that if you treat people a certain way, no wonder then they will go and take arms, because they don't see any other solution.
It's like when people are backed into a corner, they'll fight. Yeah. And is there something about you being interned, or did I pick that up wrong?
Yes. I was lifted by the army after the funeral, and I was interned, and they couldn't intern me because I was French, and even if the French police was looking for me, it would have been difficult to explain. So I was charged on trumped-up charges, and
trumped-up charges?
Yeah.
Like what?
Possession of explosives. And but then they dropped the charges to riotous behavior, and there was no riots, because I remember John Hume coming out in the street and asking the young people not to riot, that we would bury our dead with dignity in front of the whole world. So there was no riot at the time, but they thought that maybe riotous behavior would be less uproar.
And did they go ahead and charge you with that then?
Yes, and I did 6 months in Criminal Road Jail, where I learned my English, actually. So I didn't learn it in school or university.
And how had you been managing with the language? I mean, up until then, was it just
like when I was in London, I was working in a French restaurant.
Oh, okay.
And I was sharing a flat with a guy who was a French teacher. He was English, was a French teacher. So all I knew was 6 pence for the bus and half a crown for a pint. Gosh,
things have changed, haven't they, in more ways than one? Yeah, and your English is excellent, obviously, after 26 years, I suppose.
But I lost the accent.
Well, there's no denying that. They'd never say that you're a dub through and through. Maybe you are in your soul and in your heart, but certainly your accent gives you away every time. But Crumlin Road Jail, I mean, you hear about it, or I hear about it on the radio, on the TV and stuff like that. What was it like, 6 months inside in there?
Yeah, but first I spent 2 weeks in Armagh Jail. Because the remand prisoners were put in Armagh because the internees were in D wing until they were transferred to Longcash and or the Maidstone, I can't remember. Anyway, the internees were there, and but I mean, like in a sense, because most of the people were there were political prisoners, so it would have been from people who had refused to fill in the census forms, the civil disobedience, to people who were involved in paramilitary activities or whatever. So kind of, there was a great sense of community, and it was us against them.
Okay, even within the prison itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of, there used to be a lot of things we did just to mess up the system.
Is it worthy of Phoenix FM radio to hear details, or are we better off not hearing any of that?
No, it's better not to hear, because
I
think, don't want them to know where we were up
Fair
to.
enough. No, I understand completely. Yeah.
In case some of the prisoners are still using it.
Fair enough. And were you treated well, say, by the screws, as they call themselves?
But I mean, it all depends. You had screws who wanted just peace, and then you had others, because but I mean, it's like everywhere. They have 2 stripes, and they think, that gives them
power.
Yeah. Misunderstanding. To feel powerful, they have to put somebody down. But at the end of the day, I now realize that's because they are so powerless themselves.
Yeah, indeed. Difficult times, I think, though, for a young fella Still, I mean, after all you had been through, and then landing yourself inside in quite a conflictual situation, presumably inside in the prison.
But again, like, I mean, I was taken under the wing of there was my cellmate Thompson, and he was in for not filling in the census form and refusing to pay the rates and all of that, and he was a gentleman, and so I was taken in, if you want, by the other inmates. You know, like, then also I had lost 2 friends on Bloody Sunday. So it was kind of, I was taken into that community. I didn't feel like a stranger. And then people went out of their way to teach me English, you know, and of course Irish history. I think I might have learned Irish history with a certain slant on it.
But even the fact that you know there's a slant in it is healthy in itself. I think so. Tell me, did your mother, was she alive at that stage?
Yes.
And did she know what her son, her wonderful son who had left the family at home, what he was in the middle of?
Yeah, she knew, because the French consul sent her. But I was also, I was lucky because I had another mother here in Ireland, because when I was in Derry, there was this wonderful woman. She only died last year, Mrs. Anderson. She was a widow and she had 12 children. But she took me in, you know, to make a baker's dozen. Nice. And she always wanted me to marry one of her daughters.
Wasn't going to happen, was it?
No, it didn't happen. But she came to the wedding with the youngest one, just in case I would change my mind.
You're right, cheeky thing you are. I'm sure she's turning in her grave if she heard you.
No, she was a lovely woman.
Really? Oh.
Really.
So salt of the earth people, as you say, you know, that you've experienced
and all
along
their family.
the way.
I mean, I consider them like my brothers and sisters. If I go up to Derry, you know, it's a big party, because, you know, there's 12 of them.
Big party, plenty of celebration. So the man from the consulate brings you to the border.
Yes.
What happens then?
So I went on to Dublin, as I said. I was. But that's the second time. You see, I was the second time. This time they didn't put me in his hands. They put me in jail. But at the end, and it was the 18th of June 1972, because I remember the date, because that was the date of the anniversary of de Gaulle appeal from London to the French resistance.
What is that, pray tell?
I was put on a plane to Paris with 2 RUC men. A change in London, put on the plane with 2, and my passport was given to the pilot. And the French consul told me that he was giving me 48 hours before notifying the French authorities that I was being deported. And but I didn't take any chance in case the English had. And I was lucky, because at the time planes were landing at
Charles de Gaulle?
No, it wasn't Charles de Gaulle, it was Orly. And you had Orly 1 and Orly 2. Yeah. And so the international planes were landing, I don't know if it was Orly 1 or Orly 2, and the internal planes at the other one. Okay. And so when we landed, the 2 cops stayed on the plane. I got my passport back. I had no luggage because I was coming out of prison. And but there was a plane from Corsair who had landed, you know, with a Corsican flag on the tail. So I just joined the queue of people who came out of the plane and didn't have to pass through immigration. And disappeared.
And disappeared to where?
But I disappeared in Paris, and but then I went back home after a few months in Paris. I was working on a building site or a cleaner, you know, in cleaning, where you paid in the hand, and there was no social welfare number or whatever. But I went back to see my mother because she wanted to see me, and but I'd come to see her. I stayed one night in the house, and I went to visit some friend the following day, and then she phoned me into the friend, said, "Don't come home. The police were already there looking for me." So I went back to Paris.
What does that feel like? Your mother ringing you up and you telling you that? It means you weren't going to see her again for a while.
Again, I think there was kind of the excitement, and anyway, like I always has wanted to leave home, because I mean, growing up, I say we were a large family. It was difficult. There was a lot of violence in the home and all of that. So actually, we all ran as far as we could, as soon as we could.
Okay. And do you think, on hindsight, that was a good thing for you to do, or do you ever regret having left?
No, because I just realized only a few years ago, like kind of that the person I am is because of what happened to me. And what happened to me gives me maybe an understanding.
Yeah, I understand.
And that, that understanding, okay, there was a price to pay for it, but there is also a reward.
What was the biggest price that you paid for that?
Like, for example, I can speak English now. I can live in this country. I speak 2 languages because my parents couldn't afford to send me to university.
Right, okay.
So that's one of the reward. Price, but it's not about that. It's about, like, I was sexually abused when I was a small child. So there was a price also to pay for that, about confusion about my sexuality and all of that. But also there is the other side as well, is that people feel at ease with me. It's like it takes one to know one, or whatever.
Empathy.
Yeah.
A common understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that something that you talk about on a regular basis with people that you trust? I mean, the fact that you're talking about it here on the radio.
But like I don't mind talking about it because I have no guilt about it, and I have no regret either. It happened, and that's just it. No, it wasn't always like that. I did follow an 18 months course in the Rape Crisis Center,
Right.
and that wasn't easy, but it was worthwhile.
And when you say it wasn't easy, tell me how it was.
Because the terrible thing about it is that with abuse, you try to bury it, but it comes back, But you, as long as you don't deal with it, it will still,
Surface.
Yeah. So you have to deal with it, but to deal with it, you have to confront it. You have to relive it in all the details. So it's like you pay it twice. You suffered it then when it happened, and you have to suffer it again. But this time you're not alone. This time you're more adult. This time you're prepared. You have support, your counselors or in the group.
But it's hard going through.
But it's
something
hard.
like
I
that.
remember some Wednesday night where I wasn't able to drive home.
Really?
And a friend would drive me home, and maybe another Wednesday night it would me driving him home.
Right.
But like we're best friends now, that friend. And it's like, when I remember my grandfather, his best friend was the friend he had in the trenches. When you go through hell together, that's forged links.
Sure. Gosh. And how long I know you said it already, but how long was the course in the Rape Crisis Centre?
Well, it took 18 months before the...
Long time. But worth
yeah,
every...
yeah.
But very painful along the way.
Yes, but it's worth it because as I said, I can speak about it and with no feelings. It's just it happened.
So
the feelings have been spent, and then.
And as you say, it's like there's a better energy after replacing them.
Because you use so much energy trying to keep the feelings down.
Sure.
What you have to do is to spend them. The anger, the frustration, the fear, the pain, whatever.
I always think it takes a very brave person to stand and face the fear, because it is fearful, isn't it, to actually start to go through it again. Yeah.
But it's worthwhile.
Okay, and that's the message you want for anybody who's listening to hear
anybody who has been abused. Yeah, it is worthwhile, and you're not alone.
Very valid. And would you mind me asking, as to that had happened a long time ago for yourself, what was it that actually brought it to a head where you decided, enough, I need to do something
my own
about
children. When I had my own children, and when my son was came to the age where I was when I was abused, it suddenly triggered back all the memories. And then the fear, like you hear about abusers have been abused, so the fear of becoming an abuser. And I didn't want that.
Sure. Yeah, and sometimes in society there is that sort of that belief that the possibility of, because somebody has been abused, that they become abuser. But I would say about 85% of the case that is not.
No, either you become locked into the victim role, or instead of facing to your feeling, you pass them on to somebody else by becoming an abuser.
Right.
But as you say, it's a minority.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And but a lot of people are caught into the victim and repeating situation because you have such low self-esteem.
And you were here in Blanchestown. I mean, like, you are involved in so many things that I know of. So I'm sure I don't know half the stuff that you're involved in. You're involved in the men's group.
Yes.
Tell me as to why it was that you decided to start the men's group.
Well, I was working for the local employment services, and I was based in Blakestown, and my job as a mediator was to work with people who have been long-term unemployed, or young people who left school early, or lone parents, or people with disability, and try to look at ways for them either to go back to education or training or employment. But suddenly we realized that there were 75% of clients were women and only 25 men. It was like if the men had given up on themselves, because if you look at the statistic of unemployment, and the same, but the VEC had done a research that people taking up courses were mostly women. Everything that was happening, it was the women taking it up, like the men had given up on themselves. So there was two great men, John Murphy and Martin. Geez.
It'll come back to you. Yeah. He'll forgive you.
John and Martin and Derek. We decided that maybe it was time to do something for these men, because where were they? They were either at home with the zapper, changing from channels and getting in the way,
Did you know that for a fact, or was that just your instinct that was what was happening to them?
No, it was for a fact. You can't see it, you hear, because the women were coming in and they would talk about the husband, or the children, the young people come in and talk about the father or the brother or whatever. And then the pub or the bookie, and then the frustration coming back home. And so we decided to do something, but we didn't know what. And I think it's Martin who came up with the idea of a breakfast, because he was working in the youth initiative in Blakestown, and they're where the shops used to be, there where Lidl's is, and they used to have one of the unit there, and they used to give breakfast to the young people before they went to school, and then when they came out of school, give them a meal and help them with the homework. And so the facility was there. So invite the men, because they had done that. They had invited the mothers for breakfast, They had invited the parents, but only the mothers had turned up, as usual. And so invite the men for a breakfast, Right, so we started on the Thursday morning. So it was in the middle of the week, and Wednesday morning. And that's, the end of the week before the Thursday.
Before people get paid?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had the breakfast, and we started doing the breakfast together, and then, like what we are doing now, sharing our life experience, and people will discover, geez, I thought I was the only one like that. Right. And that's created a bond. And then some of the men went back to education. Two went back to learn to read and write. One guy could only write his name, and the other one his name and his address.
Right.
And now one of them has published a few poems, and the other one short stories. John Murphy went on to do courses, and we all did a course on committee skills. What is the role of a chairman and a secretary and a treasurer, so we could be set up as an organization and get funding and, be able to show what we did with the funding, have a policy, all these kind of things to be a proper group. And then group facilitation and community development. And John Murphy is now the coordinator and manager of the Ballymun Men's Centre. And at the time, only a few years ago, he was an unemployed roofer.
Wow.
But he did put the work in it, and he's moved on.
And today, is the men's group still operating?
Yes, I just come from a meeting there. The men still meet on the Monday morning. They meet in the NYP in Schellering Road on the Monday morning, but some of them like me, are in work, or some have gone to education. So we meet now on the Wednesday night as well in the Hearthstone Community Centre. And that's just where I came from.
Right. And even today, is it the same type of thing that you do as you did when you started off, in terms of sharing experiences, the camaraderie, that bonding of sort of the men of the area?
It had lost at some stage. I think it had become a bit cliquish. I think groups evolve, and as I said, Martin and John have moved on. Martin is now studying in Carlo. Mm-hmm. So kind of some of the men had moved, and some of us kind of maybe got stuck in a rut. But we had a very good AGM there not long ago, and there is a new energy in the group. And already on Monday morning, there was 2 new members for the breakfast. So kind of the energy is back, and is great.
Excellent. And so, obviously, people, men in the area, if they're available, presumably you'd say come along.
Yes, they can come along. So it's on the Monday morning. It's in the NYP behind St. Philip's Church on the Sherin Road, Clonsilla, or on the Wednesday evening at 7 in the upstairs in the Hearthstone Community Centre.
What would you say to the feminist groups who'd say, oh, there's the men now all meeting, what are they talking about? I'm sure all they're doing is giving out about the women. Is that the case?
Oh, we might as a joke, and but anyway, like, I think it's one stage as well. I mean, I think that when the women started as well, they started to give out about the men, and then you realize you cannot do without half of the population, And now we try to be very constructive instead of being negative. It's not about trying to pull the blanket one side or the other. But I think that, I think a woman whose husband might have been all the time flicking the channels and being in her feet, and the frustration, or going to the pub, spending the money he didn't have, or going to the bookie, spending the money he didn't have, and bringing back his frustration at home. I think if he goes to a breakfast and he come back and he's all much more relaxed, I don't see how she could feel threatened by that. On the contrary, there is a change for the better.
Right, absolutely. Yves, just changing track a little bit, would you see yourself as a spiritual person, or does that even make sense to you?
Yes, and it's strange because it's like what we were talking about earlier on. Like, I'm spiritual. Nothing is like, I don't want to confuse spiritual and religion. Religion for me is part of spirituality, yes, but then it's being manipulated or whatever and set in stone. But yes, because I remember you were asking me, how was it, like when things were happening to me, and I said, why me, God, Jesus, what have I done, whatever, until I started to realize, that's what happened to me, must have had a purpose, and then I can see it now, because the way I can be with people who have been very, very hurt, and can be very angry, or can be like, only a few weeks ago in work, I'm working in Foss, a young man came in very, very angry, and he was kind of going to wreck the place and all of that, and it was only women working downstairs, and they were a bit afraid, so I went down, they called me, I went down, and he had gone out, but I was able to bring him in, sit him down, and so it was like an apprenticeship. No, but I didn't know at the time, It's no looking back. Okay. So there was a purpose to it. Mm-hmm. And so I have, spirituality. And then few years ago, 10 years ago, I got a phone call from a very good friend of mine telling me, would I want to go into a weekend in Sutton and meet this woman from America, teach you how to talk with animals. I said, it would be interesting, on the racetrack or whatever. Get it on the horse mouth or the dog's mouth. And it wasn't that at all. It was something about Native American culture and about the totem pole process. And it's about that we are made of 7 levels. Each human being has 7 levels, and you start from, like the chakras. Actually, you find that in the East as well. It's like an old knowledge. And you have 7 levels from the physical, to the feelings, to the power, to the relationship, communication, intellect, and spirituality. And it's to go on journeys, and you meet the 7 animals of your totem from each of these levels. And some of them might have been wounded. Let's say, talking about spirituality, let's say if you were a young person and you believed in the church or whatever, and then you've been abused, what would it done to your spirituality? You've been betrayed by the people who were supposed to, for example, maybe also depending of your gender, where women, you say, oh, it's very unladylike, and maybe your power would have been quashed, or your expression would have been quashed. But for men, for example, myself, I was cut off from my feelings because you had to be strong. So you meet each of these animals, and then they get into council and they heal each other. So it's a very, very, very gentle way and very entertaining way, because it's like you're talking with animals. It's very difficult to explain. It's like a dream, but you're awake. It has to be experienced, but I know I love it, and it's brilliant.
Is it a type of meditation?
Yeah, it's a meditation. It's a guided meditation. You go to a place, to a sacred and secret place where only you can go, or people that you invite, and that's where you meet them.
And is there different animals for the different parts of the body?
Yes.
Because, I mean, obviously we're on radio, people can't see you because you're pointing to the various parts of your body as to where the various feelings and emotions are.
Yes.
So, like, for example, you were talking about your emotions and you had your hand to your tummy. So,
but even we say in English, I have a gut feeling.
Absolutely.
Like the same about a relationship,
right.
The heart.
The heart,
say, when she walks into the heart, my heart, or he broke my heart.
Indeed. But are there animals corresponding to those parts?
Yeah, but each one has a different animal. So maybe you can have a bear in one place. Somebody else might have a bear in another place, or a maggot, or a fly, or a tiger, or whatever.
And what animals have you met when you have been in that state of getting in touch with your whole sense of
for
self?
example, for a long, long time I had a crocodile in my belly, my feelings. And he was a very angry crocodile, and when all the other animals went to drink, he always was at them instead of participating, because he was hungry, he had been ignored for a very, very long time.
Right.
So I had another animal, the porcupine.
Very prickly.
Because I was hungry at the time as well. That was my communication animal. The porcupine sorted out the crocodile.
Wow. Wow.
And so it's beautiful. I love it, because it's like fables, but it's like it's like some power in you, your own intelligence, or your own divine, whatever you want to call it, knows what is needed for you, and this is a process. I do nothing else than to bring you there and allow you to do it yourself, which is what I love, because it's very respectful.
So you're very much allowing the person in some way themselves to feel whatever it is, whatever animal is actually coming forth for them and their person.
And that's the right animal for the right time, because the animals evolve.
Okay. And so if I was to ask you, what animal is forefront in your being at the present?
But I would say the wolf, my power animal, because for a long, long time I had no power. I had a big hole in here. Each time I went to meet my power, there was. But no, in inside I can't see it, because the way I had been, I've been raised Corsican, and we have a big confusion, like the Sicilians, between respect and fear. Yeah,
I do.
So I wasn't ready to have a power animal, and but then through the process, eventually I realized, especially about the crocodile. The crocodile thought he had power over the animals, but it was fear he was instilling. I mean, like, do I fear Bush? Yes. Do I respect him? No. Do I fear Nelson Mandela or the Dalai Lama? No. Do I respect them? Yes. So that was a lesson for me. I need to learn.
Right.
And the wolf is my power animal, and because he is how you call an animal that can be alone, but also that is very social.
Right.
Because wolves live in society. It's all about cooperation for hunting, and even if a wolf get his leg trapped in a trap, it will eat his own leg and then go back to the pack and still have a place in the pack. If he cannot, or if she cannot, or he cannot go hunting anymore, he will be left with the young ones when the others go hunting, and he will teach the young ones to hunt, because he's hopping on 3 legs. They have a chance to catch him.
So he still has a purpose, and he's still respected in some
Yeah,
ways
exactly.
by the pack.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's so maybe there is also a lesson for us as human, that with people with disabilities, that why dismiss somebody? We all have something to offer. We all have maybe what is called that divine spark in us.
And it sounds to me as though that weekend that you went up and met that lady was quite life-changing in some respects.
Yes, it was. I think that's where it started to change. I had gone through the rape crisis center, and as I said, it was very hard and all of that. But really for me, and I don't want to be like proselyting or whatever, because I think for some people it might be yoga, some other people might be martial art. I think there is different doors, but I know that door worked for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you talked about the totem pole, is it similar to that? Does it come from the same kind of idea around North American history and belief and ideology?
Yeah, when the young man was 14 years old, and 7, even in a lot of culture, is a magic number. 7, Indeed. 14. 7 you do, 14, 21, and but they used to go on a vision quest for 7 days, where you don't eat and you don't, in nature, and they met the animal, and they came back with their name, crazy horse, sitting bull, running cloud, because sometimes an image, very often it's an animal, but it could be also another image. It could be a stone, a sword, a mountain, a river, whatever.
Something that was meaningful.
Something that is meaningful for you.
Okay. And tell me about, what's this thing about a sweat lodge? Because I know certain people who have spent time in a sweat lodge. Pray tell, what is it?
Okay, so through the work, through the totem pole,
right,
I met this man, Carl Big Heart, and actually the way I met him is, again, talking about predestination or coincidence. Is that I was at a training workshop for the totem pole in a beautiful place, Gorse Hill. It's on Brayhead, between Bray and Greystone. And because I snore, I don't sleep in the house with everybody else. I sleep in the training room, which is a beautiful room with view over the Irish Sea, and of course it's facing east. So in the morning I got up and there was a beautiful sunrise, so beautiful that I had to go out and sit. And again, talking about spirituality, to see the beauty of nature, or the creator, or whatever you want to call it, that is free. That means this is happening every morning. And if you're watching it or not, it's still given, And I was there appreciating it, when from the corner of my eyes I saw another man sitting further down, and we just nodded, and that's how I met Carl Big Heart. And so Sweat Lodge, it's a Native American ceremony of purification, and you have a hut which is made of willow and covered with blankets, with a pit in the middle, and you sit around the pit inside the lodge. So there is a certain way to go the sunwise. You come in from the east, then you come out again. And you sit in the lodge, and there is a big fire outside, and stones are put in the fire. So that's the energy of the stones, millions and millions of years, from the beginning of the earth. And this is brought into the pit, which is like the womb.
Right.
Yeah. And water and sage and sweet grass is thrown out. So it's like a sauna, and the temperature rises, but except that the flap is closed and you're totally in the dark. You're absolutely in the dark. You cannot see. Yeah. And the heat becomes higher and higher. So you're sweating, and by sweating, of course, you eliminate toxins, But also, there is a spiritual dimension, because you offer each round for different aspects.
When you say you offer each round...
Because you have 4 rounds.
What does that mean?
So stones are brought in and the flap is closed, and water. But then when the stones are getting cold, the flap is open again and more stones. So the temperature is even rising and rising and rising.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you can pray, you can sing, you can drum, to keep your mind focused. And we find that also in the Christian religion, to reach another stage through mortification. If you take Logderg, it's the cold there and the wet instead of the warmth, or Cropatrick,
indeed,
barefoot, and the sweat trying to climb it. So there is, it's something that is universal, and expressed in different ways in different religions.
And I know from people who go and climb Croagh-Patrick, it's very much about penance and offering it up for sins. In the Sweat Lodge, when you talk about focusing, is there something in particular that you focus on?
But the first one, you focus on yourself and your ancestors and your family, and that you offer that for maybe to break that would be my own view, but because of, let's say, my upbringing and my life and all of that, is to break the circle, not to pass that on.
Break the pattern type of
thing. To the next generation. So I offer that. The second one is for the whole human race, and the third one is for all living things, and then the fourth one is about the earth and thanksgiving for all the gifts of the earth.
Wow. Very holistic.
Yeah.
In the widest possible way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you start from the individual,
sure.
You move to the and then to the universe.
Wow. And is that something that you would practice quite frequently?
But Carl comes at least twice a year here in Ireland, and he's so much in demand now that he's doing some in Glencree Reconciliation Centre, but also in the West, in the Burren.
Wow. When's he coming back? Any ideas?
But he comes usually, but we just missed him there. He was there in November, and he will come back again in the spring.
Okay. Just before we finish up, I'm wondering, in terms of, we've talked about your past, we've talked about the present, but the future for Yves, where do you see yourself going, and what do you hope to aspire to?
But it's interesting, because I think I'm not worried about the future. It's like, that feeling of to be in the hand of God. It's like when I look back at all my life, it only makes sense now. So I'm not trying to make sense ahead.
Okay.
Is maybe the way I see it is using my knowledge to heal. Right. And the last journey I had with my animals, and they told me that what I had to do was to integrate the 4 aspects of the person. So I have to integrate the visionary. So I need to have a vision. But the vision on its own is nothing. So my vision is to make, of course, the world a better place, where people feel welcome, and they have their role, and they have their place, and they are respected. That's what we are doing in the men's group. That's what I try to do in my job. So that's the vision. But the vision is not enough because you could be yapping away what the vision don't do. So you need the courage, you need the fire in the belly of the warrior. So I think I have proved myself as a warrior, even if I was a reluctant warrior sometimes, you know.
And is the fire still lit?
Yeah, the fire is still there.
Now,
and then the teacher,
yes.
and the teacher is kind of, it's not only about teaching others, it's also learning for yourself, yeah, learning from experience. And my animals have given me a great motto. My bear is a lovely animal, my bear. Because when I didn't have an animal of power, I had an animal of protection. And he gave me a motto, me, I never make any mistake, never ever. I only keep creating new learning opportunities.
Wonderful. And with that wisdom, Yves, I'd just like you to finally tell me, you were to bring a CD, a piece of music that is something that you enjoy.
I decided to bring a French song, and I thought about La Mer by Charles Trenet, but you've played it before. So I have another one here. It's a song by Lynn Renaud, and she's a French singer, but she was so good in France that she couldn't make it. She had to go to the States to make a career in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. But she has a beautiful song, which is Étoile des Neiges, which is it's a love song and it's a song of hope. I love this song because it's a song about a young man who has to surmount difficulties to get what he wants, which is the hand of his beloved, and he has to go on a journey, and that's all about it.
So let's listen to the journey.
Yes.
Dans un coin perdu de montagne, un tout petit Savoyard chantait son amour dans le calme du soir, près de sa bergère au doux regard. Étoile des neiges, mon cœur amoureux s'est pris au piège de tes grands yeux. Je te donne en gage cette croix d'argent et de t'aimer toute ma vie je fais serment. Hélas, soupirait la bergère, que répondront nos parents? Comment ferons-nous? Nous n'avons pas d'argent pour nous marier dès le printemps. Étoile des neiges, sèche tes beaux yeux, le ciel protège les amoureux. Je pars en voyage pour qu'à mon retour, à tout jamais, plus rien n'empêche notre amour. Et quand les beaux jours refleurirent, il s'en revint au hameau. Et sa fiancée l'attendait tout là-haut, parmi les clochettes des troupeaux. Étoile des neiges, ces garçons d'honneur vont en cortège, portant des fleurs. Par un mariage, finit mon histoire de la bergère et de son petit Savoyard.
Oh, my sincere thank you to Yves Chavanne for that wonderful interview. Thanks, Yves, very much indeed. And if you have a comment or indeed an opinion about that programme or any of the other programmes that you've heard in the series Journeys, you're more than welcome to email me at journeyontheairwaves@hotmail.com, and that's all one word, as you well know. Since it is the last programme in the current series, I want to say a big thank you to all my guests down through the weeks who have shared their wonderful stories and I suppose have given us a glimpse into their hearts and into their souls. And thank you very much indeed for that. And it's been an absolute honour listening and an absolute pleasure in getting to know each and every person indeed. So thank you all. Now, I am gathering information and people and stories and all the rest of it for the next series. Now, if you know of anybody or indeed yourself who would be interested in taking part in the next series of Journeys, I would love to hear from you. Now, what you can do is you can either email me at the address journeyontheairwaves@hotmail.com, or indeed you can actually ring the station here in Dublin City and Olivia, and the telephone number is 865 8020, 865 8020, and somebody will take your message and indeed they will pass it on to me and I will get in touch. And I would absolutely love to hear from you, because let's be honest, we hear such negativity on the airwaves a lot of the time, and I suppose the whole idea of Journeys is about inspiring one another. And you know what? You can inspire with your story. Enough said. So from myself, Caroline Brennan, take care of yourselves, and until we meet again, happy journeying.